Good morning, good afternoon. I'm so glad that you're here with us today. My name is Amy Herrera. I'm a special agent with the FBI's Washington, D.C. field office, and we're here to talk today about frauds that impact older adults. Before we get started with the content of today's webinar, I have just a handful of quick administrative announcements to make with you. First off, we are not issuing continuing education credits for today's session, but if you are attending today to earn CPEs, you will receive tomorrow an email that has a certificate saying that you attended today. So you can use that certificate to apply to whatever group typically would sponsor your continuing education credits. So look for that email to arrive tomorrow with your certificate. We welcome your questions. We have structured today's panel conversation around the set of questions that we received from those of you who registered in advance. And so many of the questions that you have, we will likely get to already. If you think of a question, type it in the question box as we go. And if we have time after getting through the main questions that we already received, we will add back in those questions from today's audience as well. We do have 3 handouts for you to download whenever you would like. One is a report from the Internet Crime Complaint Center about fraud targeting older adults. One is a report from the Federal Trade Commission about fraud impacting older adults. And one is a brochure about elder fraud. So take those as you would like. Download them, print them, share them, spread the word as widely as you would like. We are recording today's session as well. So we will be able to share with you the link for where this session will be hosted. It's the same spot where we put the link from last week's session as well. So you will see that also in your email that will arrive with you tomorrow. If you're a member of the media and you're looking to write a story about what you're listening to today, please reach out directly to us through the chat box or the question box, and we'll connect you with the appropriate public affairs person so that you can go on about that function. And lastly, special thanks to all of the co-sponsors for this Elder Justice series. And those folks are the National Capital Region chapter of InfraGard, the ABA Foundation, the FINRA Investor Education Foundation, and AARP. Thanks so much for joining with us to sponsor these sessions to raise some awareness on frauds targeting older adults. And that is the end of today's administrative announcements. I am very pleased to hand the virtual microphone over to my colleague, Mr. Wayne Jacobs, who serves as the special agent in charge of the criminal division at the Washington, D.C. field office of the FBI. Mr. Jacobs, sir, over to you.
All right, thank you so much, Amy. Appreciate it. As Amy mentioned, my name is Wayne Jacobs. I'm the special agent in charge for the criminal cyber division here at WFO. I do want to start with a round of thank yous first to Amy and the private sector team for doing what they do. Partnerships certainly serve as the foundation for our work, and appreciate all the work they put into putting events like this together. I also want to thank our panelists for taking some time to share their expertise this afternoon, this morning. And last thank you to the participants who are here on the call. Certainly appreciate that your time is incredibly valuable for all of you, and certainly want to make this a good use of your time. The role of law enforcement and our partners here, oftentimes varies and is quite involved, but I think the most important thing that we can do is to educate folks. There's certainly opportunities for us to investigate, arrest, and prosecute these types of investigations, but our goal here is to make sure they don't happen in the first place. And so you're all a critical part of this in terms of tuning in and getting information which we know will be valuable to you. My ask of all of you post this call is to take this information and share it with folks who are not on the call, right? All of you can serve in the role as ambassadors for us. And again, just critically important that we get as much of this information out to the public as we possibly can. So with that, I'm going to have the panelists introduce themselves, then we'll jump right into the questions. Goal here is to get through the questions as quickly as we can, and then hopefully get to some questions from the audience towards the end here. So with that, Emma, if you don't mind kicking us off.
Thank you so much, and good afternoon, everyone. It's great to be here today. My name is Emma Fletcher. I'm a senior data researcher with the Federal Trade Commission. And my role at the FTC is to sort of comb through the millions of reports the FTC receives each year about fraud, to suss out the big trends and surface those for the public so people can learn how to spot and avoid those scams. I've written data spotlight reports on a variety of topics, from gift card scams to the rise of social media scams, cryptocurrency scams. And I often touch on how the data shows that fraud is affecting seniors differently than younger people. And that's a very interesting topic. for me, so I'm very happy to be able to speak about it today. I also write the data section of the FTC's annual Protecting Older Consumers report, which Amy mentioned is available to you today as a brochure that you can download. I do need to give our standard disclaimer, I'm afraid, about the fact that the views I express today are my own and don't necessarily reflect those of the Commission or any individual commissioner. And with that, I'll hand it back to you for more introductions. Thank you.
All right, Rachel, go ahead, please.
Hi, I'm Rachel Yurkovich. I'm a management and program analyst with the FBI Internet Crime Complaint Center. I've been with the IC3 for about 9 years. I've been working elder fraud. I was actually part of the original contingency when the Elder Justice Initiative began back in 2017. My focus mainly is tech support fraud and government impersonation fraud, but I do handle a wide variety of different kinds of frauds affecting the elderly. Now I lead a team that receives, reviews, processes these complaints. You know, we match them up to cases, we hand out referrals. As a matter of fact, the IC3 last year sent out over 6,700 referrals to law enforcement for potential cases. So I also prepare PSAs, which are also posted on our website if anybody would like to go read those. I wrote the elder fraud report for the past 2 years. So that's mine.
Outstanding, thank you. And last but not least, Patrick.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for attending, and thank you to everyone who put this event together. I definitely appreciate it. You may have seen in advertisements earlier that this role today was going to be played by Supervisory Special Agent Matt Reynolds. I am not Matt Reynolds. I will do my best to stand in his stead. I am a supervisor out of the Washington field office, and my squad investigates, among other things, frauds and swindles. And so this particular threat has a very special place in my heart. We've got about 12 agents on our squad that are deeply focused on trying to investigate elder fraud and try to educate the public related to elder justice matters, which is why I'm here today. We work closely with Rachel and her team, helping us get some of those referrals and trying to turn these into solid cases that we can prosecute. I'm very happy to be here today, so thank you very much.
Okay, very good. So we'll just go ahead and roll right in. First question, which will be directed to Rachel at first, and then Emma for follow-on comments. What are some of the most common scams affecting seniors?
So in 2021, the IC3 received over 92,000 complaints by victims claiming they were the age of 60 or older. And that was about losses of $1.7 billion. And those are complaints filed directly with us through our website. For this year, we're kind of on track to beat that number. I don't want to say beat that number, but yeah, we've already had 34,000 complaints from over 60 victims and losses of $1 billion. And that's just in the first 4 years or first 4 months of 2022. The scams that are reported the most aren't necessarily the ones where we see the most money loss. However, the most reported scams are your tech support scams, your non-payment, non-delivery scams where victims order something on the internet and they didn't receive it. Confidence fraud, romance scams, that encompasses your romance scams where you think you're having a relationship with somebody online, or it also encompasses grandparent scams where you might get a call from your who you think is your grandson or your granddaughter or your niece or nephew, and they say they're in trouble, they need help, and it sounds like them, it has their mannerisms, but really it's a scammer. The other fraud that's reported the most are your government impersonation scams, where you might get a call from somebody saying they're the Social Security Administration or the DEA, saying your identity's been used in a crime, and they want to help you clear your identity. Investment scams are on the rise too. That wasn't reported as much last year, but we're seeing that in the first 4 months of this year, that's starting to increase also.
All right, great. And then Emma, what are you seeing from the FTC's perspective?
So I like to focus on the reports that we get where people have lost money. We find that about 75% of consumers who report fraud are reporting to alert us to an attempted fraud where they were able to avoid losing money. And those reports are very helpful to us. And when we include those reports, we see that frauds where well-known businesses are impersonated are the most frequently reported to the FTC, and those are frauds involving things like Amazon impersonation or impersonation of a bank, that sort of thing. Really, any well-known or trusted company. Those are very, very often reported. But when I narrow to just reports where people lost money, you may be surprised to hear that the most frequently reported fraud is online shopping fraud, where consumers order something online and very often they simply don't get what they ordered. And that is the #1 fraud in terms of reports with a loss for all age groups, not just seniors. In fact, younger people are even more likely to report losing money to that type of fraud. But another way to think about this is which frauds disproportionately harm seniors? What is our data showing about that? And when we look at the frauds where you have a disproportionate number of reports from adults 60 and over, what we see is that older adults are 5 times more likely to report losing money on tech support scams. So that one really stands out. 3 times more likely to report losing money on prize, sweepstakes, and lottery scams, where you're told that you need to pay money to get your supposed winnings that never materialize. And then about twice as likely to report losing money on frauds that impersonate a family member or a friend. Very often these frauds impersonate grandchildren. So those 3 really jump out as disproportionately harming seniors. Overall, we see that seniors are very often on other types of frauds less likely to report losing money than younger people, or about equally likely. So the story is more nuanced than many people recognize as far as how fraud affects younger versus older adults. I think the most accurate way to put it would be that it affects each age group differently.
Great, thanks for your perspective. Certainly some overlap there with the tech support fraud and grandparents, but then also a bit of a different vantage point in the online shopping. So very much appreciate that. Question #2. What fraud causes the biggest losses among elder victims? And I think we kind of touched on this in the first question, but Emma, if you want to start there for any additional comments.
Yes, Rachel mentioned romance scams, and we're seeing a lot of that too. For every age group, romance scams were #1 last year on total reported losses. And reported losses increased 6-fold on romance scams from 2017 through 2021, 6-fold increase in losses. So it's really pretty staggering. And what we see with romance scams is that older adults are about equally likely as younger adults to report losing money to a romance scam, but when they do lose money, they report losing a lot more. So the median loss for those 70 and over to a romance scam is about $9,000. And we're also seeing that these scams are starting not just on dating apps, but also on social media. So you don't have to be actively seeking a romantic relationship to be caught up in a romance scam. One thing that I want to note is that the losses, the biggest losses for people in their 60s and 70s are a little bit different than for people 80 and over. For the 80 and over age group, prize, sweepstakes, and lottery scams were actually #1 on total losses, not romance scams. And those scams really stood out for the 80 and over age group. These are scams that very often start with a phone call, and we're seeing very large losses for 80 and over. Typically where, again, I think I mentioned earlier, people are asked to pay taxes or fees to claim winnings that never actually materialize.
Great, fantastic insight. Rachel, any further comments?
Yes, she mentioned earlier about the non-payment, non-delivery, not receiving what you ordered online as being the highest losses. For us, it is the tech support scams where the highest losses are reported. And I think it is because the evolvement of the scam, the different ways now that they are tricking their victims. And we always learn, the scammers evolve and they learn different ways. And, once we get used to one thing, they pick up another way to do it. But tech support is our biggest loss reported by our over 60 victims. As a matter of fact, and from all the victims in 2021, the elderly victims, the average loss was $18,000 per victim. And there were over 3,100 over 60 victims that lost more than $100,000 each. So that's a huge number. But like I said, the largest financial losses, of course, tech support last year was $238 million. Overall, that was like 170% increase from the year before.
Wow.
Yeah. And for this year, we're already at $200 million for our over 60 victims in tech support losses.
Okay. Yeah, you mentioned how these schemes are evolving, and we'll get to some of that in the questions to come in terms of what we're seeing specifically as to how I think we may have lost Rachel. Hopefully she gets back on. We'll just roll with it. But yeah, we'll talk about how perpetrators are pursuing these types of scams these days. So question number 3. Great, Rachel, you're back. Are seniors of different ages targeted for different kinds of scams? And we'll start with Emma again.
Yes, we do see differences between the seniors in their 60s and 70s as compared to the 80 and over group. I mentioned earlier that the prize sweepstakes and lottery scams stand out for 80 and over versus romance scams for those in their 60s and 70s. But another big difference is how these scams are perpetrated. With the 80 and over group, they're more likely to start with a phone call. People are losing money on phone fraud at much higher rates in the 80 and over group, whereas with the seniors in their 60s and 70s, since about 2020, we've seen that that age group is more likely now to report. When they report a loss, they're more likely to report that the fraud started online versus over the phone. So that's an interesting shift that we've seen. And another important difference is that the 80 plus group, when they report losing money, they tend to report much, much higher losses. So the median overall loss to fraud for people in their 60s was about $500, in their 70s about $800, and then for people in their 80s it was $1,500. So much, much higher losses for that age group.
Interesting. Okay, Rachel.
Mm-hmm.
The IC3 does not track different age groups above the over 60 category, and that's mainly a privacy thing. Once you're over 60, we say you're all pretty much part of the same fold. But it's privacy reasons, we don't ask for anything more granular than that. But we do, in reading the complaints, do see similarities from what Emma just mentioned, is that your older victims, it tends to be more phone calls. They are generally more trusting when they receive a phone call than the 60 to 70-year-old range, which, like I said, is more likely to report things that happen via the internet directly.
Great. Okay, question number 4 here. Next few are for Patrick, but we'll certainly open up to the other panelists for comment. So Patrick, who are the criminals and organizations perpetrating these frauds, and why are they doing it?
Thank you. So investigations for us are really revealing over time, and as these frauds and swindles begin to change over time, that typically most of our scams against seniors are being committed by really criminal enterprises. You have organized groups that are targeting our seniors through these fraud scams, and usually it's from overseas. And some of these organizations are so organized that they'll have names, structure, leadership, organization charts, but then others are going to be more loosely put together. Some of these are going to be operating from office spaces. So you may have seen, tech support scam footage online on YouTube of, large buildings where there's a workforce and their whole job is to engage in tech support fraud. But others, you might just see this happening, from the comfort of someone's home. And the folks that are engaging in this activity are exceptionally good at what they do. They have an excellent job at building rapport, and they're all going to be reporting up the chain to leadership. How they're motivated or why they're doing it is pretty simple. It's money and greed. For some of these folks, I think it's just a way of life. It's the job that's available to them where they are, and as they do better at it, they are more successful and they move up within the organizations. But at the same time, some of these actors are engaged in this activity for other purposes. It's the scams are engaged because it is in furtherance of another scam. You might have a romance scam which morphs itself into a money laundering, a money mule campaign, which is to hide funds related to other criminal activity, be it drug trafficking, human trafficking. And in some of these instances, we are finding that the activity does bleed over into financing of terrorism activity. So the main goal is to pull from our seniors here their financial wealth and gains that they've earned over all these years, and to either use it for themselves or to facilitate other activity.
Great. Rachel, anything to add there?
I think he covered it pretty well. The one thing I will add is that in a lot of these organizations, they work with other organizations. Can you still hear me?
Yeah, we can still hear you.
Work with other organizations to facilitate this. Somebody who is, running a tech support scam might contract out with another organization that has money mules to receive money. They'll also contract out with somebody else to help route their calls and to build their pop-ups that you'll get on the computers. So they know how to work together and they know each other. And yeah.
Great. Okay, next two questions are somewhat related to one another, so I'm going to try and consolidate here. How are these scams committed, and how are the scammers specifically targeting older adults? Patrick, if you want to start there.
Sure. So I'm going to kind of go back to some of the themes of the different scams we've really already talked about, which are those most pressing in terms of romance scam, tech support, and then impersonation. Most of these romance scams, actually most of the scams themselves, are going to be perpetrated either over the internet or through the phone. And the romance scam is typically going to start with either an online dating service or, as we said, a social media platform of some kind. Recent reporting has actually said individuals just playing online games are receiving messages and chats through those. And the scammers in these situations are going to build relationships. And through that relationship building is either going to happen through social engineering or just general rapport building via conversation. As I said before, they are exceptionally good at this process. The ability to make meaningful connections in a short period of time is staggering, actually, with how they're able to do that. Then throughout the course of that romance scam, the individuals are going to start really creating a relationship which is stronger than just someone that's met online. They're going to profess strong feelings or even love for the victim. And then that will eventually lead towards the request for the victim to engage in some sort of financial transaction on behalf of the illicit actor. And that could be, purchasing gift cards, shipping, purchasing phones, shipping items for individuals, making wire transfers, and recently transferring funds by going to cryptocurrency kiosks, depositing money and shipping those off. And these individuals, the victims, have no idea what they're doing until they're coached and given information on how to do that by the illicit actor. In terms of tech support scams, we've kind of talked about those, but it's really just pop-up messages that are showing up on your laptop or on a cell phone, which is giving you some sort of dire circumstance happening with your computing device. There's a virus or there's some other issue, and there's a number or a link chat that's provided to you to reach out and try to solve that problem. Once you're on the phone or in a chat conversation, the illicit actor will ask for you to allow them to have remote access into the machine, where they're going to try to help fix the problem for you. Of course, while they're in there, there's any number of different things that the illicit actor can be doing on your computer, to include, getting all the way into, putting keystroke loggers onto a machine, or if they get far enough along, even initiating wire transfers out of an individual's bank account, really what seemingly is at the request of the victim. And then lastly is the government impersonation scams, where you'll have individuals who are receiving telephone calls, as we've said, either from Social Security Administration, DEA, the IRS, saying that there's some sort of dire circumstance that's happening, whether your identity has been stolen, or in some cases, you haven't paid your taxes and the IRS is sitting outside your door ready to serve a search warrant or an arrest warrant upon you. These are all these dire circumstances that create a tremendous amount of urgency, and they will the scammers will basically suggest to the victim, this can all go away if you will simply make this payment, purchase this gift card, send us the information, and we'll take care of it for you. So that's really how the scams are generally committed. You know, people are especially our elder population, anybody would be, but our elder population is so concerned to avoid any sort of legal trouble whatsoever, and to please especially a person of authority, that they're willing to really adhere to these requests of the impersonation scams quite simply without many questions asked.
Great, thanks for the insight. Rachel, anything to add?
I think he covered it pretty well.
Okay.
Good job.
Emma?
Yeah, I would just add that one thing that we're seeing a lot of is these days is scammers sort of obscuring the fact that they're asking for money at all. So for example, in the case of romance scams, they will convince you that they are someone who's very savvy at investing in cryptocurrency in particular very often. And wouldn't you like to learn how to invest in cryptocurrency as well? And you know, by this point, you trust this person, it's your new significant other. And they will then walk you through the process of investing in cryptocurrency, but of course you're really actually sending cryptocurrency to them. Also in the case of many government impersonation scams we see now, and business impersonation scams, the individual who's targeted will be led to believe that the scammer is actually helping them. That person is helping them to secure their money because there's been some sort of security breach or compromise, or you know, they're in trouble with the law, but it's all a big mistake, and you know, this agent is going to help them to secure their money until it's all sorted out. So in securing their money, they might, for example, put it on gift cards, and then of course they need to read the numbers on the back of those gift cards to the person, and how they end up losing their money. So that little twist makes consumer education a little bit tricky. To say never pay someone you haven't met doesn't quite work when that person is actually obscuring the fact that you're paying them at all. So just a little insight there on how some of these are taking place lately.
Yeah, it's a great point. And I'm sorry, Wayne, just to jump on, I just recently had a case just like this, where the individual that had contacted our victim was so convincing in that the victim's identification and their bank accounts were at risk, that the victim was encouraged to start removing money from their bank account and deposit it into a different bank account, which the illicit actor was helping them to organize and to set up. And exactly as you described, as that happened, the illicit actor was able to immediately move those funds over into, basically convert them over into cryptocurrency and zip them out of this person's account. Thankfully, we were able to step in the middle of that and disrupt it, thankfully, because we had about another $1.7 million, which was ready to go out the door from this victim. So it absolutely happens just that way. So great point.
Yeah, fantastic. So we talked a little bit about the level of sophistication that's involved with some of these schemes. Next question sort of relates to that. It's for Patrick. What tricks do the fraudsters use in executing these schemes?
So related to, are you unmuted? Could you check your mute?
Yes.
You are, okay. Sorry, I just was hearing an echo. For romance scams, really what tricks they're relying upon is the relative isolation and desire for companionship of our older adults. I think this has been made worse in the last 2 years related to COVID, because there was a larger a feeling of isolationism from individuals, and really our elder population are looking for people to talk to. They are looking for companionship, someone who's going to take great interest in them and what they're doing. And our illicit actors are capitalizing on that. As I said, are very, very good at what they do. They will capitalize on the idea of having one lottery or a sweepstakes in order to pull upon the heartstrings, if you will, of the victim, who might be thinking of their family down the road. Could they leave more money to their children, to their grandchildren? And so they are willing to engage in those activities. The The elder population is oftentimes more trusting, and as I said, in a pleasing way, wants to please individuals that they're talking with or engage with. And specifically with romance scams, that feeling of trust or that emotional connection that happens then gets weaponized by the illicit actor, and they will leverage that emotional connection that's been made in order to induce victims to be able to send money places. One of the biggest things that I think you'll see in these is a sense of dire circumstances or urgency. And they're not gonna, the bad guy in these situations is not gonna allow you to have the time to talk to someone trusted, because there's just not time. This is gonna happen immediately. We have to do it right now. You can talk to them afterwards. They capitalize on that feeling of dire circumstance. And again, I go back just with how the individuals are creating those emotional connections, is by doing research in advance. They're going to social engineer this thing so that they can find what you're interested in. They might go and look at your social media pages. They're going to find what are your interests, hobbies, how many grandchildren do you have? Do you have a dog? What kind of dog is it? And they're going to create those connections so it's you, me, same, and all of a sudden you feel this immediate connection. It's how we have seniors who are really professing love for an individual that they've never met in person, never talked to actually on the telephone, or perhaps talked with but never seen face to face, and they are in love with this person that they met weeks ago, if weeks. Sometimes it's just days.
Rachel, anything to add?
No, I think he hit that pretty well, is that the urgency and just the isolation that they try to inflict upon their victim, especially, that don't talk to anybody else, don't tell anybody else this is happening, or else you're going to lose all your money, or that, especially like with grandparent scams, don't tell anybody because, your grandchild, they're going to go to jail if any of this is leaked out to the public. And it's just that urgency. And I think the thing to remember is that in real circumstances, if this was really happening in life, there's always time to stop and think.
Yeah, great. Emma, anything you want to share?
I would absolutely echo the urgency that they create, the panic, and their interest in separating you from anyone else who could help, whether by coaching you on what to say to the person at the bank or the person at the grocery store when you're buying those gift cards, keeping you on the phone so you can't speak to anybody else who might intervene. These are really common tactics they use. They're also sometimes, actually quite often, particularly with tech support scams, there will be a second round where they come at you saying that they can help you get your money back. We call those recovery scams, where you'll get a call, maybe pretending to be a government agency that's able to return your money to you, or what have you. But that's just another sort of a phase 2 of the same scam to be aware of.
Yeah. And then just to add, Patrick, I don't know if this was off of your squad, right? I recall recently where we had, just going to the level of sophistication that some of these folks use, we had a victim who had asked to speak with the police, and the subject then said, okay, I'll give you a number, or this number is going to call, from the local police department. And the subject then had a number spoofed for a local police department, call that person and say, yes, I am Sergeant such and such, and you should speak with the person to resolve the issue. So again, just to the point of the lengths and complexity and sophistication of some of these schemes in terms of being able to continue to perpetrate the fraud. Okay, next question number 8. This one's for everybody. What tips can you offer for spotting these frauds? We'll start with Emma.
Well, I was just going to say caller ID spoofing. Be aware of it. It's a huge tool in their toolbox. Anyone who is under the impression that caller ID is a useful tool to help you avoid being defrauded is actually perhaps at greater risk, because caller ID can be readily spoofed and is very often spoofed by scammers that are impersonating businesses or impersonating government agencies. So just be aware of that. Do not trust caller ID. Also, be aware of the payment methods that scammers typically use. They're going to insist on certain payment methods, which is unusual in a legitimate exchange, right? They're going to want you to buy gift cards, put money in a cryptocurrency ATM perhaps, walk you through buying cryptocurrency, or maybe they're going to have you wire money, whether through your bank or Western Union, MoneyGram. Those are things to be aware of. Just watch out for those payment methods. And anybody who's telling you that you're obtaining those gift cards or crypto or wiring money to secure your funds, that's a big red flag as well. So I would say just to be aware of those sorts of things, the broad tactics that they're using.
Great. Rachel?
I'll just kind of echo what Emma said. Of course, the urgency in that and the payment methods, legitimate businesses and government agencies are not going to require you to send them gift cards or to put money in Bitcoin ATMs. So really, it's just recognizing, this how unordinary what they're telling you to do is.
Great. Patrick?
Yeah, I could echo the same, and I will go back to what Emma said earlier. The views of the presenters is not necessarily the views of the organization, right? So I work for the FBI, but this is going to be my viewpoint. So, boss, I hope you're okay with this. But
Good.
Be on the lookout for a rat, okay? Be cautious, keep your guard up. My wife gets angry with me all the time because oftentimes I will assume the worst in someone until they prove otherwise to me. But that's maybe a law enforcement mentality from working on the street for a while. And you don't have to go that far. You can be trusting, but just be careful who you're trusting and how you're trusting them. I've said this a few times in some interviews or other presentations that I've done, especially as it relates to romance scam. I do believe in love at first sight. I met my wife, I fell in love with her immediately, but it's rare. And so if someone is falling in love with you just immediately within days and you've never met them in person or had a great conversation, be wary of that. And then if that's coupled with send me money or do this, as we've just described with the transferring funds through cryptocurrency or gift cards, followed by that sense of secrecy, all of that together and that sense of urgency are kind of your red flags that all go together. I will add on the sense of secrecy piece of this, and sir, you just mentioned a minute ago about the local law enforcement. On that example I gave with the tech support victim a little while ago, I had to stand on that victim's doorstep in front of her house with her niece, her actual family member, standing next to me. I was standing in flesh and blood with my badge, with my credentials. And it took me a half an hour to talk my way inside that house to try to help her from sending additional money somewhere. And that's because she told me that the illicit actor talking to her on the phone said, someone's going to come here and tell you they're with the FBI and they're trying to help. And that person's a liar. Again, the rapport that was built created that scenario where I couldn't get in the door when I was standing in front of that person. So all of those things together, are the perfect storm, if you will, and you got to be on the lookout for those different red flags. And when you have that immediate urgency situation, I think one of the things you want to be able to do is to hit the pause button and take a breath. As Rachel said a few minutes ago, there is time, though that might be urgent, there might be enough time for you to unplug your computer, turn off your phone, stop that phone conversation and reach out for someone you actually really do know and trust, a family member, to say, does this sound right? Does it make sense? The grandparent scams is a perfect example. If your grandchild is in dire straits, why don't you reach out for your children and find out exactly what's going on? So anyway, just some thoughts on that.
Great. Yeah, I think all in the spirit of just basic due diligence, and I'll put in a plug just for open source research, right? Not to say that the internet has all the answers, but oftentimes what we're seeing, telephone numbers, companies, names, that if you just pop into Google, sometimes the scammers here are using the same infrastructure, right? The same telephone numbers to perpetrate their frauds, and it just pops up straight away that, hey, this is a number that's been sort of repeatedly used to perpetrate fraud. So just baseline stuff, slow things down, do some research, ask some questions, should put people in a good place. Okay, question number 9. This one is, looks like it's from the financial services industry. It says, I work at a financial institution. What red flags might I see that could help me spot scammers trying to defraud my customers? This one's directed to Rachel.
Yes, the main thing for financial institutions is to really, especially if the victims are coming into the institution to conduct transactions, is nervousness. Are they on the phone? Do they appear to be getting direction from somebody on the phone and they're not allowed to put it down? Sometimes the scammer will have them put it in their pocket and be giving them direction that way. So it's really nervousness. Do they seem to be using their phone a lot? Uncharacteristic withdrawals or transactions that they wouldn't normally do. Ask questions, what's this for? Sometimes they're given direction, oh, this is for a real estate transaction. I need to get out $20,000 in cash. Ask a lot of questions, involve other people within the bank. Normal reporting mechanisms in the banking industry can take longer than this scams actually occur. A victim can come in today and withdraw $10,000 and come in tomorrow and want to make a $20,000 wire. Normal reporting mechanisms might not capture that. We need to get better at identifying those uncharacteristic transactions and withdrawals that somebody might be making that they just wouldn't normally do, and making that in-person face-to-face meeting with them, saying, hey, what's going on? Tell me, what this is for. I know it sounds like it could be an invasion of privacy, but in the end, you're really just trying to save them.
Great. Patrick, anything to add?
Yeah, so I will just follow up on that. What you've just described is exactly how that other tech support scam was thwarted. It was a member of the bank who was exceptionally diligent, noticed what was happening, and had a relationship with the family that was there was a trusted family member associated with the account, and was able to reach out for that niece that I then showed up on the doorstep with. But if not for that, that bank representative who noticed that the activity and the transactions were out of the norm, and asked some of those inquiring questions and received some suspicious answers, this fraud would have continued on for quite a while. So absolutely, I think it's very important to have those face-to-face relationships. Hard to do because so much banking is done online anymore. But oftentimes these activities are done in person within an institution itself, brick and mortar building. And so it makes sense to educate our the people working at the banks to be able to be on the lookout for this sort of thing and ask those follow-up questions. So great.
And kind of follow up, I think that's a separate topic maybe, but I think also within our institutions, we need to get a little bit better on the back end, because so much is done online now of recognizing these unusual transactions. If somebody doesn't spend $10,000 at the drop of a hat normally, why are they now sending a $10,000 wire from their online account?
Great. Okay, next question. How can I protect my customers or relatives against these frauds? Patrick, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I think we were just kind of touching on it. As we've been doing this elder justice awareness campaign, one of the things that we are trying to do here is to thwart the activity before it happens. And the biggest thing is education and awareness. This is a problem that we're not going to prosecute our way out of. Our hope by educating the public and educating the elders themselves or caregivers of our elder population on what to be on the lookout for is geared at removing that piece of the Jenga puzzle here that's going to topple this crime. It's like what we've done to try to remove money mules from the middle. If we can't move money, then you disrupt the criminal organization. Same thing here. If we can prevent you from becoming a victim in advance, then thankfully we'll have fewer cases to investigate, and that would be a wonderful thing. Again, I go back to those, if it looks and smells like a rat, probably is scenario with the romance scams or tech support, all of these, we've given you the red flags to be on the lookout for. So I think the protection is really the education and setting up what we've, Rachel was just describing a moment ago, is those trusted relationships either within financial institutions or with mom and dad, to try to have some of those touch points and trigger points that are going to set off an alarm for us that says, wait a minute, I need to jump in here and see what's happening and what's going on. Regular contact with mom and dad. Hey, what's going on? Who you been talking to? What are you doing on? And that's hard, especially when we live across the country, maybe from others. But there's ways to probably do that. It's going to take some effort, but I think it makes sense to try to go through that effort.
Absolutely. Emma, anything you want to add?
Yeah, I would just say, thinking about people who are wondering how they can protect their parents from fraud, just be mindful that fraud can happen to you as well. It's happening to every age group, and come at it with that in mind as just sort of a conversation, talking about fraud, passing on what you know, maybe frauds that have targeted you can kind of open a dialogue to where they'll be more comfortable sharing with you their own experiences, the targeting that may be happening to them. Just knowing about the types of frauds that are circulating and passing that information on is key. In fact, FTC has a education campaign called Pass It On that is just built on that premise. So I would just recommend, opening a dialogue of just talking about it. It can really protect you and the seniors in your life. And then also, I'm thinking particularly of the 80+ group with the problem of scam phone calls. If you go to ftc.gov/calls, you can learn about ways to block those calls, whether it's a landline or a cell phone. There are ways to do it. So I recommend checking that out to help reduce the problem.
Great advice. Okay. Next question. How can seniors or their caregivers report these frauds? And Emma, we'll start with you.
FTC's reporting system is at reportfraud.ftc.gov. And it's actually an all redone system, very easy to use, and people who report get tips and advice at the end specific to their particular report. And those reports are shared with all of law enforcement.
Great. Rachel, another forum?
Of course, there are several outlets. Our website is www.ic3.gov. You can report any type. We receive all kinds of reports, whether this is fraud-based or they're intrusion-based. But I would, we review every complaint that comes in. We attempt to link those with active cases within the Bureau or other law enforcement that we know about. We store those indefinitely for law enforcement to come back to. We have an online portal for law enforcement only to research. We refer out cases based on aggregate complaints. If we see a complaint come in, and we can look to see if we have other complaints related to that, and we can aggregate those out for a case referral. Like I said, last year the IC3 referred out over 6,700 potential case referrals. And then we also take all those complaints. If we can't link it with an active case and we can't refer it out, we do share some complaint information with the FTC. I believe last year we shared about 10% of what we things that we have received with the FTC also.
Great. I think the key takeaway there is simply just report, right?
Yes.
Talked about a lot of collaboration and sharing of reports across agencies. And so no matter where it goes, you can rest assured that it's going to get to the right place. Okay. Next question. What does law enforcement need to prosecute these crimes? Patrick.
So I will just echo the reporting. Please do report these crimes, whether you have actually been victimized or not. If it was an attempt and you were able to sniff it out, great, but you can still report that information in to us. If we are going to prosecute these cases, we need the information, and we need all the information. It's, as Wayne said a little while ago, who are the people that are calling you? What are the names they're using? What are the telephone numbers? What are the email addresses used? What sort of cryptocurrency did they ask you to move your funds over into? Did they send you to a particular cryptocurrency kiosk, for example? All of this information together, you may think it is completely inconsequential, could be the thing that links a bunch of these reports together and then puts us on the right track and actually being able to find our subject and put together a solid investigation to bring these people to justice. So give us those tiny breadcrumbs, right? Give us the little pieces and allow us to try to connect the dots on the back end between FCC and IC3, doing all that back end work. And the ability for law enforcement to share that information is critically important. And I will just make a comment on that. I've heard a few times in the past that sometimes there's some embarrassment associated with reporting. And I would say to that, I completely understand. I understand where that's coming from. But many people who have been victimized, especially in these romance scams, have been victimized by this and are feeling embarrassed that they fell for this. Well, the way to take control back is to move forward and report it. And it's your opportunity to say, all right, you know what? Okay, you victimized me, but here I go. I'm going to get myself back on the side of law enforcement here and help them catch you. You need only look at the recent public service announcement by our former FBI director related to a lottery scam that was attempted to be perpetrated against him. And there's a feeling of pride and accomplishment from having reported that information over and reached a successful conclusion and prosecution. The other thing I will say is keep in mind, as I mentioned in the very beginning, that a lot of our illicit actors in this are leaving out of the country. They're not here in the U.S. And so what will happen when a report is made locally, which I completely encourage you to do, is the locals will have to pass that on to us because their reach ends at the local jurisdiction. We are a global organization. We do have that ability to reach outside of our boundaries, to work with our law enforcement partners in other countries, again, to bring individuals to justice as we're able to put these cases together. So, give us the information and allow us to try to run with it. But I will make the last little bit of a plug, which is if you give us that information, please don't fall victim to the CSI effect or other things where, a 45-minute show of crime is completely solved and we're moving satellites from our computer. These things take time. Fraud happens fast. Investigations happen very, very slow. Give us that information and we will work on trying to get these cases solved as fast as we can.
Great. Okay. In the interest of time, there are a few more questions, but I do want to give folks in the audience here, so to speak, a chance to write in some questions. If there are none, which I would find quite surprising, we can get to some of these other questions. But if you have questions that have not been addressed by the panelists thus far, please go ahead and type those into the chat. And while folks are doing that, maybe we can get to one more question. Let's see. How has fraud against older adults changed over the past few years? Emma, if you want to start.
Well, the pandemic may have fueled an increase in reporting about online frauds. Things definitely seem to have moved more online versus the phone frauds that we saw more of in the past. Social media appears to be increasingly important as a way for scammers to operate. And then we're also seeing a huge surge in investment scams involving cryptocurrency. And those tend to skew younger, actually, but older adults are getting involved in cryptocurrency investment scams as well. So all of those things are evident in our data.
Okay. Rachel, anything you want to add?
I'll echo the investment scams. The huge trend right now is the pig butchering scams, where you're starting a romance scam and they convince you to invest in crypto. And crypto is such an issue because it's not well regulated. People know so little about it and it moves fast. The speed of money these days is just so quick that it's hard to, to stop and think and, to know what you're doing. Crypto ATMs are out there. It's really easy just to put your cash in and it's converted to crypto instantly and it's gone.
Okay. Looks like there are a few questions in the chat. So Amy, if you can help me out and just roll a few of them in.
Oh, sure. Happy to, sir. Yes, there are tremendous numbers of questions. Thanks to everybody who's throwing some questions in. We are not going to get to them all because we have not a ton of time left. Rachel, the first one is coming to you, and it's about the speed in which IC3 can react. So someone entered a question that talked about, hey, if I report a fraud to IC3, how quickly can IC3 jump into action? Is there any possibility of clawing back some of that money if it's already lost?
There are methods in place, and it's not fail-safe. We do have something called the financial fraud kill chain that is out there, and if you can report a wire transfer or an ACH transfer in a proper amount of time, we do have the potential to freeze it. We work with the field offices. That process is started automatically based upon the information that you would put into the complaint. It's all about the days since you've sent the wire transfer, the amount of money you sent it, where you sent it. We have an internal process that will kick off that system that process automatically. We have a team that does just that. But we work with the field offices, we work with financial institutions. We have all kinds of contacts within the financial institutions to potentially freeze funds. We do not recover funds, but that gives the victim an opportunity to work with the bank to maybe recall that money. So the sooner it can be reported, the better.
Okay. Amy, I'm having trouble seeing the question, so maybe if we offer one more and then try and round out the conversation with just a comment from the panelists, final closing comments. And
Okay,
then,
sure. And I think there have been a number of folks who have asked about why do scammers ask for payment in the form of virtual money or a currency or gift cards? Why are the transactions based on that? Patrick, I'm going to kick that one over to you. Why are the fraudsters so interested in using that form of payment?
Well, I will say the interest in using the first interest is, as Rachel was just saying, is in the speed of movement. If you can avoid the oversight and regulation that's going to happen by sending a wire transaction going through your financial institution and request a gift card and then receive the numbers over the phone, that money can eventually then immediately be spent elsewhere by either creating a card and going to an ATM machine, and it's gone. You're moving as fast as possible. The cryptocurrency example is the same. Again, it's speed and movement of funds, but it's also the perceived anonymity that comes with moving the funds through cryptocurrency. The belief is that if I ask this elderly romance scam victim to feed fiat currency into a cryptocurrency kiosk, and it eventually immediately becomes Bitcoin and transfers to a wallet which I control, then law enforcement's not going to be able to trace that down. So there's certainly an idea there of moving the funds as fast as possible, but also trying to obfuscate what we're going to be able to do to try to trace it. I will say that is somewhat of a misguided thought process by our illicit actors. We are able to trace to some extent some of that. It's not as fast, it's not as simple, but we're ever diligent in trying to track it down.
okay, just in the interest of time, I do want to give the panelists an opportunity just to close out with some final comments. So Emma, if you don't mind getting us started.
Thank you. I will use this time to plug some FTC resources. For people interested in staying up on the latest frauds, I would recommend subscribing to our consumer alerts at ftc.gov/consumer alerts. And you can also learn about our wonderful Pass It On campaign, which was created by and for seniors at ftc.gov/passiton.
Great. Rachel?
Yeah, FTC has some great resources, fbi.gov/elder fraud and the ic3.gov website. We also have some resources there, and they kind of point to each other anyway. We work together. But reporting is just huge. I cannot stress it enough. Just to report, even if you didn't lose anything, you might have some bit of information that is helpful that could be used to stop somebody else from becoming a victim.
Great, thank you. And finally, Patrick.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to thank everybody again for taking the time to listen in today. I hope you found that it was valuable and useful. The biggest key here is education. So, and not to steal the terminology FTC, but let's pass it on, right? Pay it forward, talk to the next person. There were 600 and some attendees today, which is terrific. If each one of you 600 attendees can talk to 1 or 2 or 3 other people, we'll be able to share this information far and wide. And that's the key. Help us to try to solve this before it becomes a problem. You know, help us help you. Don't become a victim. But if you are, report it and let us get on it, and we'll try to solve it as fast as we can. So thank you again for everybody taking time, and thanks to the skilled people who have put this thing together. It's excellent work. Amy and your team, thank you so much.
All right, great. Yeah, so lots of great resources out there. I think some in the chat. Bottom line is report, continue with your education. Lots of great resources, FTC, ic3.gov. You know, just continue doing what you're doing. And again, thank you for your time. As Patrick said, we hope that you found this time useful. And so with that, I'll turn it back over to Amy for some closing administrative remarks.
Thank you, sir. And wow, y'all had a ton of questions and we certainly did not answer all of them. So we're going to take your questions back and digest them, and maybe we can use that to build some more information, some awareness campaigns. Do remember, we do have the third session in this series that happens next Monday. So same time, noon Eastern. You will get a link to register to that session when you get your email tomorrow confirming your attendance today. So please be on the lookout for that one. That third session we've titled, Why do Scammers Target Older Adults and How Can We Help Protect Them? So our speakers for that third session will be from AARP, from the FINRA Investor Education Foundation, and from the Cybercrime Support Network. So they're gonna have some great stuff to share with all of us. Thanks again to the co-sponsors, the National Capital Region chapter of InfraGard, the ABA Foundation, the FINRA Investor Education Foundation, and AARP. And we appreciate y'all coming and listening in. Please do share the word. Remember to report. Stay skeptical and please stay safe. We look forward to seeing you next time. Take care, everybody.